welcome to this brand new episode. I'm so excited to have another wonderful guest with me. As you know, in this podcast, I try to, distill my vastly useful and unuseful brain power to whatever is helpful to you guys. And to do that on steroids, I always have a guest with me because they have so much experience of things that I don't have. And so it's always a beautiful synergy and combination. And so today I'm very excited. We have Fabienne Lindholm with us. Her company is called Rev Up Your Life. And let me just tell you a little bit about her because she's a super, super interesting character. So she's a keynote speaker, a motivator, and a wellness and beauty expert combined with deep roots in education, and has lifted women entrepreneurs to the best of themselves, which is obviously something that we really, really want to talk about. She has traveled to over 58 countries, lectured on 4 continents, and she's an optimistic, funny, bold, and compassionate person. She has managed spa teams and operations for luxury hotels, my favorites, such as the Waldorf Astoria, which is still on my list. I've been there to have, I think, tea, but well, probably not tea as they call it in America, but I've just been there to have a little bit of, cheesy snacks, but I've never stayed there. And multi-location spas in Chicago, the USA. In the last 10 years, she's been in the learning and development industry, and she's been training adults, primarily women, for global cosmetic brands. So today, we're in particular going to talk about self-confidence and self-development while running a business, which I love because you know that I'm a huge believer in super simple business strategies, but also that you have to do the inner work to keep up with your success and to create your success. Because most entrepreneurs do not make or find time to recharge. So what are some of the steps that you can create for the best working environment when you have to do it all and avoid what she calls subconscious diversion? So I cannot wait to dive into all of that. Fabienne, welcome so much to the show. I'm very, very excited to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Christine, for having me. I'm actually honored to be here, and I am so excited too. I love, speaking about self-confidence, because I think when we speak about it, it just gives us more self-confidence together. So, and the more we speak about it together, I find that there's this unity that gets formed between women, and we kind of recharge with each other. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to recharge my self-confidence.
Wonderful. Well, here's the deal though, right? Because I think we all enjoy, the motivational quotes on Pinterest about woman, hear me roar, I'm a strong woman, superwoman, power mom, we have you're the best mom mug, all of these things. And we all know what self-confidence means. But I also think there are so many things connected to it. So some questions that I will have for you, and I'm going to throw them out there. We're going to go through them one by one because I'm absolutely certain I'm going to have forgotten them in 2 seconds because I'm not super structured. But some things from the top of my head that I immediately think about is when I think about self-confidence in women. Number one is, are women aware whether they are self-confident or not? Do they care? Why does it matter? And number 2, and that's a little bit more of a one that I love, self-confidence and jealousy. How do they go hand in hand? Because I think they do. And I think it's also probably the reason why some people are scared to come across or to boost their self-confidence because they don't want to suddenly, trigger other people. So there's so much that I want to talk about, but I think we can already cover some of it by having you tell us how this became your passion topic, because you obviously started out, as managing teams, probably had a completely different career in mind. And then you discovered something or noticed something that really became, what you're doing now, your passion, which is self-confidence in women and self-development. So tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so yeah, and actually it has been a long journey, but I'm not one of those that had a dramatic experience and all of a sudden
Yeah.
my life changed. Not at all. I always say you're not going to see the whole drama in my life because it's
Yes.
always been little step and little step forward that where I got a little bit of an information, or I used to call them red flags, and then
Mhm.
I would see a red flag and I would be like, I have to pay attention to this. And so I'm not going to tell you a story about, something that happened to me that
The
was
car
really
crash or
horrible.
the illness, or like the complete, like the hero journey on steroids. I don't have one of those either, it's just like apart from I discovered I don't like
Exactly.
babies, but that's
Yeah,
it.
and I think, sometimes people think that in order for them to make changes or to move forward or to become more self-confident, that they need to get to the bottom of life in general, but it's not true. I always say you can you can live an ordinary life and be an extraordinary person.
I love
And I
that.
think that's what people need to think about, is that, you don't need to have that. So for me, it's been a long journey with a lot of mini stuff along the way. But it's because I was never really very self-confident when I was younger. I actually was timid. I always was afraid of raising my hand and make my opinion known, especially in the environment, and I wasn't aware. In school, I was always the one sitting in the back and just never really talked. And so it was never the fact like, oh my God, I was so self-confident right when I was 14. Now, it took me a while to get there, but I also learned that if I wanted to get something, I really needed to start speaking up, and I really needed to start raising my hand, and no one was going to look for me and come and get me unless I started showing up and I started kind of speaking my voice. So it kind of, I learned all of this throughout my teens until I got into my 20s. And then in my 20s, I decided to move from France to the US. And I think this was kind of the revelation for me, because I moved to the US not knowing anyone, not having any really specific plan except learning English because I didn't speak English. And I think learning a second language and being thrown into a complete different lifestyle, not knowing anyone, and not being able to actually express myself, I started realizing that I had a voice and I really needed to make it happen. So learning a language for me was the catalyst to really finding my voice and being able to show who I was, my opinion, and then kind of building my self-confidence from that point on.
Can I ask you a question? Because we're both polyglots, right? So we speak multiple languages. I mean, I speak Luxembourgish, French, German, and a little bit of Spanish, and English, of course. So, but I'm a very different person depending on which language I speak. So I'm a completely split personality, I would even say. Like, we're very close, but much closer than years ago. But I remember, especially beginning showing up online, English was my comfort blanket, it was my safety blanket. And Luxembourgish, speaking in my mother tongue, it makes me feel very different. I have a lot of issues actually explaining what I do in
Mhm,
my mother tongue versus
mhm,
explaining it in English, super easy. So
mhm.
is it the same for you?
It's exactly the same for me. English is my communicative language. That's
Yes.
how I communicate the most. I write in English. I write blog in English. It's much easier for me to write article. I'm planning of writing a book right now that I'm going to publish next year, all in English. I cannot do it in French. And I think the reason is because when in my mother tongue, I don't think I was told or taught or given the opportunity to express myself deep down.
Yes.
And when I got to learn English, I had all of these feelings during the learning process, and between the high and the lows and the crying and the happiness and the party and all of this. I learned how to express myself, and there was no one around me that could tell me not to express myself.
Yes.
So I think that's the reason, is the environment you learn the language. And
Yes.
I speak a little bit of German, and German for me, it's so hard because I have to speak German. So it's like the pressure language. And the more I get pressure, the less I can speak it. And so I can certainly not, express myself in that at all. And I do believe it has something to do with the environment in which you learn the language. Then you become more maybe connected, more like there's a feeling behind it.
I agree. I mean, I knew English. Well, we started learning it when we were 14 in our teens, but obviously I studied in the UK, and university years were a blast, and I think that my peak of confidence was most likely in my early 20s in the UK.
Yeah.
So I think that has definitely a connection. Now, not everyone has the opportunity, as we had, to really dive into a language at a developmental stage where you really discover yourself, where you shape yourself, where hopefully, you become more confident and an adult. So what have you witnessed in women, especially as you were working with women, especially also successful women in leadership positions? What were some things that you thought, actually, I might take this for granted, but I see that it's an issue and I can help them rise, level up to a different level of happiness and confidence?
Yeah. And, I think for me, it was because, okay, I moved to the US, I was an esthetician, and then there always that myth around the beautician, the beautician is not necessarily very educated. And so I found myself with a lot of people like me, and that's where I started. I'm a beautician. This is where my background comes from. And what I noticed, including myself at the beginning, but then later on in years when I was doing training and working with entrepreneurs, because a lot of estheticians are entrepreneurs. They have their own, business, and they do their little beauty salon or spa. Where the common issue was in the lack of feeling that they were educated, and that they always had that moment where they felt like they hadn't gone to college or university, so they couldn't really bring themselves forward to be the person they wanted to be.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That I learned, and watching them, and also watching myself, that we had to go beyond that obstacle or around that obstacle to really say, no, it's not because we didn't go to university or we didn't go to college that we are not educated people. We are educated.
I mean,
and we have something to offer. And that was the major component for me. Like, I can't let that happen anymore. I can't let these women think that they don't know, that they do know.
I know. Oh my God. Can we just let this soak in, that our academics do not define our value just as much as our bank account doesn't define our value? And I feel you so badly, because in my TED Talk, if anyone's seen it, it's about sleep. So it's not to do with business, but the second sentence is literally, for the longest time in my life, I felt stupid because I wasn't good at maths in school, which is kind of, if you're good at maths, you're smart. If you're not good at maths, it's very cute. You can be great at languages, but it's not, you're a little bit thick, So, and in general, I grew up that way with academics as the measurement. If you have a university degree, blah, blah, blah. And if you're not, then you're tolerated. You're nice, you're a good person, but obviously not smart, So I totally get it. And even like just on the sidelines, for me, I'm very, very aware of it with my little one. She's turning 8 now. They start to have tests in school that obviously I'm happy when she gets a great grade, but when she had one because she didn't pay attention, which wasn't amazing, I had to be really holding myself back to not scold her in terms of, defining her whole being based on that academic achievement. So I I love this. It hits me very deeply because it's very traumatic. And every time I go into therapy or work with a self-personal development coach, it's something we always work on because it always goes back to academic disappointments to my parents, not myself. I didn't care. I was 16. But, or
Yeah.
like how, even though I defined myself. So I love that we talk about this. Thank you.
And it was definitely, because in the US, it's even worse. In the US, I see all of these young women that go to university and they don't even belong there, but they go because it's the society told them that they have to go. And it's like, there should be a way for them to find another path and develop their own path and not feeling bad about it because they've decided to take that path. So this is really where it hit me throughout my years of working with all of these young women and even more mature women, that there was always this moment of compensating the lack of feeling whole, or the feel of being able to think that they were adding to society. And so in all my training, I always used to start with, okay, we are going to look at what are we adding to the society? What are we doing as beautician? What are the things we're doing to make this world a better place? And sometimes it sounds corny. Yeah, I want to make the world a better place, but I do actually.
Totally valid.
And I think it's looking at going beyond the fact that you're cutting hair and coloring people, or beyond that you're doing nails on someone, or beyond that you're doing a facial, is what are you adding, and your value you're adding to society is so great. You don't need to go to college. Let's look at that. And so that's the basic foundation of really getting people outside of that mindset and thinking that they're not worthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this. I really hope that this has sunken in for a lot of people. Let's talk a little bit about the second aspect of our program today, which is, okay, we're boosting our self-confidence. Our business is rocking it. We're crushing it. And then you mentioned a sentence. I have to repeat it. Mm-hmm. The subconscious diversion. Let's talk about it. What is it, and what can you do in order to avoid it?
So subconscious diversion is a word that I made up myself because I had to find some kind of a terminology behind it, because I needed, even for me, I needed to define it and to really know when it was happening. So it's really very simple. When we are busy and we have a purpose, we decide to go, and we have things that we need to do to move forward and keep the self-confidence up. But we found excuses for everything. Oh, I have to do my QuickBooks now, or I have to go and place the order for this, or oh, I'm going to go get lunch, or oh, I'll do that later because I need to add more additional elements into what I want to say. So we found all these little things that are diverting us away from what our purpose is, or away from what our main message is. So we we don't really realize that we're doing that. It just happens because we get busy in the concept of work, of doing small things. And we prefer to do that because it's comfortable. And sometimes when we need to move forward in our business or move forward in our purpose, then we have to push a little bit the envelope. We have to push ourselves outside of the comfort zone. So it's a little bit harder. So our brain just brings it back to what we feel comfortable. So we decide to do this, and we say, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And so that's what I call that. It's a diversion, and it's unconscious because we don't necessarily know we're doing it. We realize it way later. So why did I not do that? I was to do that yesterday, and I don't understand why I didn't do it. So it's more of a comfort place that we go into when we feel uncomfortable, but we know we have to do that. And so it's a battle in our head, all the time. We battle with these thoughts that keeps coming at us. So that's what subconscious diversion is. And we all do it. And I've done it so many times. It's not even funny.
So if we don't know that we're doing it, how can we learn to detect it?
So as I said, often we notice it afterward. So when we notice it, that's at that point, and I think having a notebook is writing it down and kind of defining, and we do that for about a week, defining what are, because it's usually one or two things we keep bringing back to get away from. So we can look at the pattern and see, okay, oh yeah, this is what I've used throughout the whole week to not do what I was supposed to do. So then we can put really a label on it, and then we can say, okay, when this happened, then we can say, oh, that's my subconscious diversion. No. I have to push myself. I have to make myself uncomfortable to do what I have to do. And so this is how we kind of define it, because if you don't define it, then you don't know what the solution is, and then the solution is, I always say, the solution is planning. Because if you don't plan, failing to plan is planning to fail. That's what we say. And I found that planning is probably the best way to keep that subconscious diversion away from us keep going into that pattern all the time.
Yeah, I agree. To like, especially, I have my planner here. It is a mess. Like, it is so empty. I honestly, this year is a disaster. And this morning I was like opening it up and I was like, oh, because I'm like, okay, when I'm ready, I'm going to get back into it. Like January, February, like we had the book launch, and now February is just, this month is literally, there's things happening that I'm reacting to, which is good. So I'm in an all reactive mode, but I know that once this swoop comes, which probably comes with spring, I'm very cyclical, very, very much attuned to the seasons. I know that this will be full. Like, this will be full of plans again, and I'll be working on steroids just to knock myself out again in summer and not do anything, So it's, we all have our different ways of doing that, and the more aware you are of it. But I agree that when you write things down and then you also notice what you didn't do week after week after week, sometimes it's also evaluating whether you should be doing them at all. Because I have sometimes, when I saw, okay, I haven't been doing this for 5 weeks, obviously I don't want to. Very often I give myself permission to drop the idea, because I'm like, there's a reason why I haven't done this. Not always, like taxes, there's nothing I can do. I will need to if I don't want to go to jail. But, if it's like a project, or if it's, I outsource this and I say, okay, I'm going to throw some money at it, or I give myself permission to give it up, So I think, but you do need to have a trace, something to become even more aware of it, painfully aware of it, I might even say.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I agree with you. I think sometimes things needs to be dropped, but I think if we have a big picture of what we want to do, and I often recommend to use what I call the OGSM, formats for planning things, and especially projects. And it's objective, goals, strategy, and measure. And you can use it for big, like for your company, you put some objectives, you put some goals, and you put some strategy together, and you put some measurement behind it. But it can also be used on a small little project. And so when this happened, that you haven't done it for 5 weeks and you're ready to drop it, you go back to those OGSMs and maybe go back to that strategy and say, well, actually, it wasn't even my strategy. Why am I even getting myself all worked up on this? Yes. So it's finding these consistent steps that we create, these planning that we create, that helps us to go back on track, so we don't lose it. We don't lose all of our, ability to be doing what we want to do. And because if we don't plan properly, I also think that it makes our self-confidence more fragile at the end, because then we ask ourselves a lot of questions and we get lost in our own thoughts.
I agree. This is really, really helpful. Now, I have one last point that I want to talk about, because I think we've learned a lot already about confidence, about how we notice when we are, not stretching our comfort zone enough, or if something's not aligned with us. Now, the last topic is quite a relevant one when you're listening to this episode, but it's always relevant, which is that you're a huge advocate as well for women development. I'm always very careful with this, because I'm very straightforward in terms of that. I think we have to all change our thinkings in terms of male and female, whether we like it or not. I don't honestly think that male and female and just women only doesn't even work anymore. I just raised this question with a networking group, which is for women. And I was like, well, what do we do about, people who are gender fluid or non-binary, so I think we have to all revisit that concept. However, we women here in the Western hemisphere, most of us, we are in a great place where we have the same rights, even though salaries discrepancies are still something that's very, very current. But in general, we're allowed to do the same things as men do, but that is not the case in the whole world. So I do think, yes, there's still a lot to do where gender is still male and female is just automatically downgraded. So what is it exactly that you're doing in order to bring awareness to this? Or, you have a certain project. So I want you to very quickly talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think, I totally agree with you. I mean, everything that you said is so on par with what's happening now. And I think, we need to be able to also build everyone. It's not just only women. We also need to build everyone. So I think it's start with young women. And in terms of the project I'm working on right now is to really work and fundraise to bring young women from other places in the world to be able to have access to some kind of education, high secondary education, of course, but at the end there's so many women that don't even have access to education. So one of the projects I'm working on is going to be throughout the whole month of March, is working and fundraising for scholarship for young girls coming from Africa and Middle East, where they have the capability to come to Maastricht, the United World College in Maastricht, to be able to finalize their studies. So that's, you have to start there. I think you have to start in young girls and being able to lift them up and give them that foundation of being able to have the same possibility and opportunities that we have here. And until that happen, we're still going to be really far on many different places, because we live in a global world and we have to lift up everyone before we can move forward.
I agree.
And I have boys at home, and I just want to make sure that there are, always lifting up women, because I also believe that this world can only happen with men lifting women and women lifting women. And I think also women lifting men. We all need to be all together as a unit, working to lift each other up and give each other self-confidence. That should be the goal for all of us.
I agree. And even though, the news are full of COVID, pandemics, or whatever have you, politics, I think number one headline should be that we have a huge issue with education, that we have a huge issues with famines still going out of the world, which I don't understand. How is that possible when we have so much money going around? But it's a truth. So this project in particular, people should obviously get involved all year round. But at this specific moment in time, if you guys are listening right now, we're in March 2022. How can people get involved?
So it's going to be through my Instagram channel. We're going to be doing it through there. They also can go to the UWC website. It's UWC Maastricht Westland, and you can donate. There's a women advancement project, and that's where people can donate. And usually there is, we fundraise for about 5 to 6 girls to come to Maastricht for 2 years. It's a commitment that they have for 2 years. So anyone can get involved either via my Instagram channel or even the website.
Wonderful. We're going to post all the links in the show notes. So you guys make sure that you, of course, subscribe, whether you watch us on YouTube or listen to us on any podcast platforms, and head over to the blog christinemeansbusiness.com/blog to read the show notes, to find all the links, to simply click on them. It will also have Fabienne's website, her Instagram account, her Facebook page. Everything is neatly compiled there. So, and you can have the audio files and the video files are also hosted on the blog. So make sure that you head over there and that you get involved, even if it's after March. Have a look at the project. I'm sure there's opportunities to support it all year long as well. And Fabienne, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this has been a wonderful, diverse discussion. Lots of practical advice as well, which I always adore, obviously. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure and I had a lot of fun. And I always like to do things laughing.
Exactly. So if you guys want to reach out to Fabienne, either to have her speaking or, see if there's some coaching she can do with you guys, then reach out to her and she will be happy to obviously get in touch as well and to answer all of your questions. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. And with a brand new guest. I'm very excited. I have no clue who it will be because I'm not organized that way, but I'm always not surprised, it's not the right word, but I'm always delighted at the conversations that we're having. So thank you, all of you. Thank you, listeners. Make sure you leave us a review if you enjoyed this episode, and I'll be talking to you soon. Bye for now.